Everybody to Alaska chapter of American Pilgrims on the Camino. Today, Mike, my better half, is going to be talking about blisters. But I wanted to give you a heads up on what we have on the calendar coming up is October 5th, which is a Wednesday. We're going to have an in-person meeting at the Alaska Rock Gym in their yoga room. And Peggy's going to talk about travel sketching and sketching on the Camino. So she has some beautiful sketchings and she's going to teach us all how to do that, add to our travel experiences. And then on Wednesday, October 23rd, we're going to have a Camino 101 also in person at the Rock Gym. So I'm probably going to be giving that unless I can talk someone else into it. But we've got a couple talks in the future. I don't have them scheduled yet. One on the Portuguese Camino and one through France. So those are kind of coming up in the future, and we'll be sending out emails. So introduce Mike Moxness, and he'll take it away.
Okay.
Start sharing the.
Well, gee whiz. Hope everybody's having a good day. I am, as she said, Mike Moxness, and married to the vivacious and leader of this merry band. And she's asked me to talk to you guys about feet and the Camino, and specifically what can get between your feet and the Camino, which would be blisters. I'm fairly intimidated because I see in the audience people with a whole lot more Camino experience than us, and a doctor and a nurse practitioner, and holy moly. So let's just see how this kind of goes. I plan to spend about 40 minutes or so on the talk. And it's going to be broken up in that way, which is in three general parts, kind of what is a blister, and the reason we talk about that is because it helps you understand the second part, which is how do I reduce my chances of getting one, and then of course what happens if you if you wind up getting one, what's first aid on the Camino. So, and sort of why should you spend the next 30 minutes listening to me instead of going out on one of our rare non-rainy days walking. I've been, for those of you who know me, I'm a registered nurse. I spent my clinical career in the emergency room of the ER, of the emergency department at Providence Hospital here in Anchorage. My other job was teaching backcountry wilderness medicine for Wilderness Medicine Institute, later on known as Knowles Wilderness Medicine. Wound up teaching for a couple of different universities, for the military, for some search and rescue outfits, that kind of thing. I retired from both of those jobs, and now I do mostly humanitarian work overseas. But what's more relevant for you guys is I've been on a couple of Caminos. I've tried to keep up with Diane on the French route, and then on the northern coast route, combined with the Primitivo. We've done several walks in Great Britain, England, Scotland, and as she said, we're about to do one in Ireland. So been an active backpacker and backcountry climber and mountaineering and so forth for about 50 years. And so I've made just about every mistake there is to make with footwear and blisters, and hopefully you guys will get to profit from those. So let's go ahead and talk about what blisters are. Okay, I keep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. First thing is to understand structure of the skin. Your skin is not one thing, it's a number of layers bonded together, and a really crude comparison might be your Gore-Tex jacket. You've got a protective outer layer, you've got the inside that, you've got the fragile Gore-Tex membrane, and inside that you've got a liner that provides some structure and some protection to the inside of the Gore-Tex, and they're all bonded together. Same kind of thing with the skin, much more complicated, more layers, but they are layers that are bound together. Okay, now No, I keep wanting to push the screen because on my computer I've got a touch screen. Okay. Anyway, so what is a blister? A blister is a bubble of fluid that results from an injury just below the surface of the skin. If it was deeper down there, it would be a pocket of fluid, but a blister presents itself on the surface, which gives us some unique problems to deal with on them. Let's unpack that for the non-medical people. Fluid. Well, what in the world is the fluid that's in there? The fluid, your body, it's a natural process that your body wants fluid to go to an injury. And why is that? Well, the fluid can protect the injury, but more importantly, it carries substances within it that help the injury heal, things like white blood cells that eat up bacteria and things like that. So if you get a wound on your ankle, or if you sprain your ankle, if you hit your thumb with a hammer while you're hanging a picture, all those injuries will swell. And the reason that they swell is because fluid's going to that area. Well, this is the same kind of thing. You get an injury within the layers of the skin, and so fluid goes there. And if it's close enough to the surface, it forms a bubble. If there happens to be, that fluid is typically clear, translucent, but if it happens to be that there was a little capillary, a little blood vessel in the area that got torn, you get some blood in the fluid. It's kind of like when you nick yourself shaving, you get a blood blister like the lower left-hand corner. It's basically the same thing as a regular blister. They take a little bit longer to heal because typically the injury is a little deeper, but for the most part, a blister is a blister is a blister. Okay, so there we go. So what kind of injuries? If a blister is a natural process of the body reacting to an injury, well, what kind of injuries can cause blisters? Well, infections, chickenpox, herpes, that kind of stuff. Thermal injuries like burns, or frostbite, either way, hot or cold, can cause injuries to the skin that result in blisters forming. Toxic or irritating substances, people, you might be allergic to some kind of cloth or substance or fluid or metal that causes blistering. Irritating plants, poison ivy, cow parsnip, all those injuries. But what we're interested in today is blisters that are caused by trauma, by a force. And now I suppose you could catch your toe in the doorway of an alberge while you're doing the Camino and get a blister that way. But what we're talking about really are blisters that are caused by friction on your skin. Okay, so going back to our little cutaway of the skin here in the different layers, if you imagine friction rubbing going back and forth on the surface of the skin, well, it's not the rubbing per se that's the problem, it's the friction. What is friction? Friction is the resistance against rubbing. All right, so if you took two pieces of paper and you greased them up with butter and you put them together and slid them back and forth, you could do that all day long and nothing happens. There's lots of rubbing, but there's no friction. If you took two pieces of sandpaper and you rubbed them together, there would be a lot of friction. It would be difficult to push one past the other, and you probably wind up ripping the sandpaper, which is sort of analogous to what happens in a blister. If you get rubbing on the skin, it tugs that upper level back and forth and winds up with tearing, bruising, injury within the skin. Fluid goes to that injury and you wind up with a bubble. There's your blister. Okay, so how are we going to prevent them? How are we going to, well, you can't really, it's probably too idealistic to say we'll ever prevent them, but we will certainly reduce them. And there's three kind of general methods, areas of approach to this. The first is to reduce friction by making the surface so slippery that you don't create any friction. Think of your paper with the grease on it that goes back and forth. Another way would be to pad your skin so that your skin is protected from the friction. Okay, and the third is to eliminate rubbing altogether by getting footwear that fits. As I said, it's too idealistic to say that we'll ever completely eliminate rubbing of your feet inside your boots, but we can get a lot closer. Okay, so let's talk about slipping and sliding first, because that was kind of the least the first methods in my evolution. And well, back in the day, I'm trying to think of all the people that are on the call. There are a few of you folks out there with gray hair that remember the old mountaineering boots, particularly the old plastic boots. You know, I mean, they didn't give at all, and they were hellacious at causing blisters. And so what climbers would often do is smear their feet with Vaseline and then put their socks on. Well, you know, you still get rubbing inside those plastic boots, but you don't get any friction because the Vaseline is helping your foot slide around inside it. Well, I mean, that sort of worked, but it's incredibly messy. And I mean, messy is not even approaching it. It's pretty much a disaster. You wind up with Vaseline worked into your sock. It's really hard to wash out because Vaseline repels water. So yeah, you could do that. There still are people who do that, but probably not the best idea. The next method people tried was powder, okay, talc or baby powders and this kind of thing. And they do two things that don't really work all that well in this context. They work a little bit. One is a little bit of powder does provide a little bit of a slidey, slippery surface. More so what they do is absorb moisture. And that's usually what people use baby powder and talc for, is to absorb moisture. What happens then is when skin is wet, it tends to get softened and it tends to create more friction rubbing. Think of rubbing two pieces of foam rubber together as opposed to two pieces of paper. You get more friction between the soft surfaces. So keeping your feet dry does help, and powder does help that a little bit. But what happens with powder is it balls up almost right away. It doesn't work very long. And then you got all these little balls of hard powder inside your sock, which are irritating in themselves, plus you have a messy sock. So, okay, it works a little bit, but there's a much better way, and that's the anti-chafing substances that are out now. You can get them in sticks, like a deodorant stick kind of thing, in cream, like in a little tub. I think there's even some sprays out there, all sorts of different brands. The runners among you probably are familiar with the Power Glide products. They're anti-chafing sticks that people rub on their skin, inner thighs, armpits, any place where skin rubs on skin. And what are they trying to do? Prevent chafing. Chafing is just friction. All right. So you can rub it on your feet, and that does help reduce friction. If you reduce friction, you reduce trauma to your skin, you reduce blisters. Okay, so you can go into, now you don't have to go to a running store and buy the Power Glide thing. That purple stick on the left is their mat manufacturer, is one that they specialize for feet, named Foot, pretty appropriately. Down at REI, you can get Squirrel's Nut Butter, which is a little double entendre on one place where they use that kind of anti-chafing stuff. Gold Bond, the old maker of the powder that in salve that we've used in the past, they also make a anti-chafing stick. I'm 99% sure that Walgreens and CVS and stuff make generic versions as well. Any of them are going to work. You rub it on your feet, it makes it more slick. You get less friction, you get less blisters. Diane uses that stuff. I don't, but it works. So now there's an interesting twist on this, which I discovered just this summer, this slip and slide idea. I went to a medical conference down in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And right before I left, I bought these running shoes. Great shoes, by the way, Topo running shoes. Really liked them, perfect fit. Well, like the third day, I'm walking around down in Santa Fe looking at old buildings, and I wind up developing a blister on my heel. You know, oh man, here are these shoes. I just love them, and you know, I'm getting a blister. Well, you know, I slapped a Band-Aid on it, and the next day, by happenstance, there happened to be a presentation by a mountaineering guide who was talking about these Engo shoe patches. You get them off Amazon. You can probably get them in the stores too. I got mine from Amazon. But what they are is an adherent patch. The back of it is this very sticky fabric adhesive. And the front is this super slick anti-friction surface. And you stick it on the inside of your shoe. In other words, you make your shoe slippery, not your foot. Okay. And, you know, you can get them in little crescents like I did. But you can also get them in square patches, or you can cut them in any shape you want. And you know, I put them in, and you can see on them, I put the first one in upside down, so it's kind of like peeling off, and that's, you know, pay attention, Mike. I put the second one in right, and it's now 3-4 months I've been wearing those. I've had no trouble with blisters, absolutely great. They work just absolutely as advertised. So if you have a pair of shoes that you really like, but every once in a while they'll give you a blister on a heel or a side of your foot, some spot that bugs you, you might want to try one of these Enco shoe patches that might salvage that pair of shoes. You know, it might be a big deal. I mean, they work for me, so that's all I can say. Well, slippery and sliding, that's one thing. Let's go with the next, which is pad and protect. If you can keep the friction away from your foot, you're dollars ahead. Okay, so being Alaskans, we all love duct tape, right? Okay, and you can wrap your foot in duct tape. And mountaineers, we used to do this all the time. You know, looking back on it, it was kind of dumb. It does work, by the way. I mean, we never got any blisters when you did that. But the problem is you got duct tape all over your foot, and duct tape doesn't stretch. And so it's really hard to get on without folding, and folds can cause their own problem. But then also your skin stretches. And so when you flex your foot, it kind of pulls against this non-stretchy tape and it hurts. Duct tape is waterproof. And so it gets all kind of slimy inside. And when you do peel it off, it leaves adherent that you got to wash off. So duct tape is a romantic favorite, but there's a lot better out there. And the better one that I've seen is this KT tape, which everybody calls it just the letters K, Kilo, Tango, KT tape. It's short for whatever that big long word is down in the lower left-hand corner on the Walgreens package that nobody can say. That's why they call it KT tape. You probably saw this at the last Summer Olympics. It was originally intended to put on your skin to kind of support the muscles, and so it's stretchy and it's breathable and it's tenacious. Well, that works great for padding trouble areas on your foot. This person in the upper left-hand corner is having trouble with blisters on the right heel of their foot. So they snip out a little shape of a KT tape that they can put on there, and bingo, there it's padded and problem is solved. KT tape will stay on. I've never used it, but people who have tell me it stays on for days. It stretches. Nice thing is it's very thin, so it doesn't cause like a lump inside your sock, which is a problem with like moleskin and things sometimes. So KT tape wouldn't be a bad idea. Now, that's all kind of high tech and expensive. Regular tape, moleskin, Band-Aids, they all work as well. You know, for example, you're walking down a trail, you're feeling a little irritation spot. You take off your shoe, you take a look, you got a red spot on your foot. It's feeling like it could be a blister later on. Just slap a Band-Aid on it to pad it, and then you can deal with it at more length at home, or excuse me, at the alberge. Well, or better yet, you get to the alberge, you take your boots off, put on your Crocs or your Tevas or whatever it is that you wear in the evenings, and your feet dry out, and the next morning you don't even, it's all healed. So, you know, for a temporary fix, a Band-Aid tape works pretty well. I don't really like moleskin because it is kind of thick and it tends to bother me, and I feel like there's something in my shoe, but some people swear by it and it works pretty well too. So, however, what I think is the best way to pad your feet is liner socks. I use them. They're cheap. You know, a pair of synthetic liner socks at REI is less than $10. They don't take up any room. You could probably get by with just one pair because you can wash them at night. They usually be dry in the morning. I take 2 pair and I alternate them. That way I know they're going to be dry the next day. But you wouldn't have to do that. You can get them made out of silk. You can get them made out of merino wool. Synthetic ones have always worked just fine with me, and they dry pretty quick. You can get them with little toes on them, like there on the right, or just plain old ones like there on the left. They aren't going to prevent blisters, but they are going to significantly reduce them by moving the friction out away from your skin to between the 2 socks. So you put on the liner sock, you put on your cushioned wool or whatever your big sock is made out of. And if there's some rubbing that's in your shoe, it tends to be between the 2 socks and not so much on your skin. So I find this good padding. I use them all the time, and it works for me. Okay, the big one, getting shoes that fit. Okay. We could spend all day talking about how to get shoes that fit and that kind of thing. It really breaks down into 3 ideas for me. Take your time, be really picky, and your shoes should feel good in the store. Okay, take your time. Don't go in, and if there's 20 people in REI and the people who work there are all rushing around, this kind of thing, come back another day. You know, take your time. Try on a whole bunch of different kind of shoes. If it doesn't quite fit, try the same brand, same size, different pair. There are variations as you go. Take your time. If you pile up 13 boxes next to you and all the salespeople are giving you stink eye, too bad. You're going to be wearing those things every day for days and days and days and days. They're the most important piece of gear that you have. So take your time and be picky. Don't buy something just because some ultra marathoner on YouTube says that they're the coolest thing now. It's whatever brand works for you, whatever fits you the best. Okay, and shoes should feel good in the store. You know, back when I was coming up, we all bought shoes that were a little bit tight because they were going to stretch out. Well, materials have considerably improved since then. Shoe structure has improved since then. Manufacturing has improved since then. And that's, you know, shoes will stretch a little bit, but not very much. And so if they're tight in the store, they're going to be tight at home. They're going to be tight on the trail. You know, get shoes that fit in the store. Walk around, not just like up and down in front of the display, but all over the store. And then when you get home, walk around for a few days in them at home. Like my running shoes I bought and took to Santa Fe, the irritation doesn't often show up the first hour or 2 you're wearing the shoe. So if you wear it around inside the house for 8 hours, a couple of days, you're going to start picking up spots that might be irritating that you didn't notice in the store. Maybe you can fix that with an Ngo pad. Maybe it's to where you want to take it back into the store and get a different make. But shoes should feel good in the store. Take your time. If you're not in an area near a store, I got friends that are like that. They don't live in a town with an REI or a running store. Zappos and a whole bunch of other online orders houses out there offer free returns. And my friend Daniel, he'll buy a pair of boots and he'll buy the boot that he wants plus the size half up and the size half down. He tries on all 3. He wears them around. He returns the 2 that he doesn't want. It's a free return. You just slap the label on, you put it out for the mail carrier, and done. Be picky, take your time. And then the big question asked most on every Camino forum, what shoes should I take? Okay. I break shoes out into 3 rough categories. If you're catching a theme that I break everything out into 3s, you're probably listening. But anyway, 3 different categories. And the first are the running shoes and their cousins, the trail shoes. Those are on the left. And on the far right are the old waffle stompers. The big 6-pound made in Austria, heavy boots. And in the middle are the light hikers. They're a little bit of each. Well, waffle stompers first because they're easy to eliminate. You don't need them on the Camino. Think of why they weigh 6 pounds. They're there because they weigh that much because they build structure into them that keeps your foot in place when you're wearing a 60-pound pack and you're climbing up a 50-degree slope, or you're clinging to the side of a ledge, or you're walking on a slope, a side hill. You know, it's this big, heavy boot that traps your foot in place, and the structure provides protection from heavy-duty stress. You don't need it on a Camino. It's 6 pounds that you can use for something else, so they can stay home. Go to the other end. Lots of people wear running shoes on the Camino, and lots of people have successfully done it. I've also seen the worst blister I've ever seen in my life of somebody who was wearing running shoes on the Camino. Now, why is that? The reason that probably most of you are wearing running shoes as your everyday shoes, and I do, is because they're so soft and nice and comfortable and light. Okay, they don't have much structure to them. They're not meant to. They're meant to contain your foot as you're going down a flat street, sidewalk, path, not too steep, flat, no big rocks, no logs to step on, no rocks to tippy top, no side hilling, nice, flat. Okay, and many Caminos are just like that. And so if you could wear running shoes on a lot of the Caminos. Now, there not being a lot of structure in the shoe, you got to be really careful to get a really good fit with them. But that's easy because there's a whole lot of running shoes out there. If you're in the market and you're not quite sure, I would encourage you to look at the cousins of the running shoes, which are the trail running shoes, the orange ones in the lower left-hand corner. They look just like running shoes, pretty much. They're a little beefier, a little bit more structure, a little bit more underfoot. They might have a toe cap. But the big deal is that they're meant to hold your foot in place while you're walking on a side hill or on a steep rock or stepping up on a ledge or on a log or whatever it might be. And so it prevents your foot from rolling around on uneven ground. Okay, and so if you're carrying a pack, albeit a light pack, if you're going to be on uneven ground, a trail running shoe is probably going to be adequate. Diane uses trail running shoes, you know, and she does great. My personal favorite are the one in between, the light hikers. They're like the SUVs of shoes. And as you can see, they've got aspects of both the waffle stompers and the running shoes. They've got quite a bit more structure. You can see the structural bands on both of these models, the Merrill and the Solomon. Toe caps, more aggressive tread, more underfoot. You can get ankle height, you can get shoe height, whatever you like. But these shoes tend to have a little bit more structure to keep your foot in place, and which is a quick way of saying it won't allow your foot to roll around when you're on rougher country. If your foot's not rolling around, you have less friction, you have less blisters. So trail runners, light boots, both work for me anyway. Running shoes will work if you're on pretty good surfaces and you've got a good fitting. You absolutely don't need waffle stompers. So to kind of review all that, there's old school and new school. You know, the old school was slip and slide by using Vaseline. The new is anti-chafing sticks. The old school was duct tape to pad. Now use liner socks or KT tape. The old school were waffle stomper boots. Trail runners are lightweight boots. Now this slide doesn't really fit in any of the three categories, so I stuck it in here. It's kind of halfway between reducing blisters and first aid. It's pay attention and act right away. If you feel a hot spot or irritation inside your shoe, stop at the first convenient spot. Don't sit in the trail, but find a bench or a log or a fence or somewhere you can sit down, a grassy field, take your shoe off, take your socks off, go to skin level and look. It might be a stick or a pebble or a fold in your sock. You know, you let your foot air out a little bit, you put it all back together again, everything's fine. What you don't want to do is think, oh, the Alberge is only 1 more mile, so I'll just kind of like go that last mile. Because then guaranteed, when you get to the Alberge, you'll have a blister. So stop right away. If the other people are with you and you don't want to make them stop, let them go ahead, but stop. Take your shoe off, take your socks off, and look. If you get a little red spot on there, I mean, you may have a little blister already. You may have a little red spot. What can you do? Slap a Band-Aid on there. And, you know, that'll probably come off, you know, when you take your shoes off when you get to the Alberge, but it's enough to get you there without any further damage to your foot. And then you can kind of deal with it once you get to the Alberge or hotel or your house or wherever it is that you're going to be. So what if you get blisters? First aid on the Camino. 9 times out of 10, you feel an irritation. You take your shoes off, you take your socks off, and this is what you see. The blister has already formed. They form pretty quick, and the roof has already gotten ripped off. That makes sense. What caused the blister to start with? Friction. Okay, the roof of a blister is dead tissue. It's very fragile. That friction is now worse because there's a bubble, and so there's more pressure. It's rubbing on it. It tears the roof off the blister. Now, in one way, this is the easiest case to deal with because this is just an open wound, same as if you cut your foot. What are you going to do? You need to clean it and you need to protect it. By cleaning it, clean water is enough. You know, you don't need Providon iodine, you don't need alcohol, you don't need, you know, you don't need first aid cream, you don't need all that kind of stuff. You can if you want, it won't hurt. Well, it will hurt, but it's your pain, not mine. So the water will, but clean water is good enough. So go in, get your foot in the sink, let it run on there. Use a damp cloth, whatever it takes to get it cleaned off. Let it dry off a bit. You don't want the open tissue there to dry out, but you want the skin around there to dry off, and then cover it up. You can use a Band-Aid, but these dressings are the way to go. And anybody who hasn't used these needs to start using them. They are hydrocolloid dressings, but nobody can say that word. And so they call them by blister dressings, you know, blister Band-Aids, blister bandages, something like that. You can see a good illustration of in the upper left-hand corner there. What they are is a kind of super revved up version of a Band-Aid. They're waterproof. They have very tenacious adhesive. And the dressing area, where normally you have just a little pad on a Band-Aid, actually has a chemical in there that when it absorbs fluid, it turns into a gel. So you got a weepy blister there. You put this hydrocolloid dressing on there. The fluid that weeps out of that blister effectively makes its own little pillow over the blister. These things are waterproof, so none of the stuff leaks out of the blister into your sock, and none of your grimy, sweaty, salty dirt in your sock gets into the wound. The adhesive is very tenacious, and these things are designed to stay on from 3 to 7 days. So you can shower in them, go to bed in them, change socks. You're probably going to forget you even have it on. After 5, 6 days, you look down there, oh my God, I forgot about this. And you pull it off and the blister is 80% healed. I mean, if it comes off earlier in the shower or something, just put another one on it. But they are much, much better. Band-Aids are good for a quick fix to get you to the next spot. But these hydrocolloid dressings are a lot better. In Europe and thereabouts, Compeed, the middle one here, was the main brand. When we were over there, every pharmacy you went into had a big display right by the door because so many Camino walkers came in looking for it, and they just call it Compeed. But now the states, there are generics like down in the left-hand corner, blister cushions, Care One. I'm not sure whose brand that is. Band-Aid makes them. Walgreens has a generic. I'd start with 4 or 5 of these from the States, tuck them in with your Band-Aids and stuff. They don't weigh anything. They don't take up any space. And if you have a blister, you don't want to be hobbling around looking for a drugstore in Spain. And you can always get more over there. I take 4 or 5. You're probably only going to need 1 or 2, but guaranteed that if somebody sees you have one, they're going to want to borrow one for their blister. So nice to have a few spares. What if the blister is still intact? Okay, the blister, the best thing, the medical answer is that you should leave the blister alone, because the blister is a natural process that's part of the healing of the wound. But that's obviously unrealistic. That guy's heel in the upper left-hand corner, you can't walk with that blister, right? So we got to do something about it, all right? Well, what are we going to do? Well, I'll talk through it first and then show you some pictures in the next slide here. But generally what we're going to want to do is deflate, is not pop, but puncture gently the blister. We're going to express the fluid out of it, clean it off, and cover it up with one of those hydrocolloid dressing, one of those blister bandages. Okay, so what you want to do is you have to clean the area. You don't want to introduce any bacteria into what is a sterile environment. So clean the area. You can use alcohol. If you're a nurse like me, you're carrying alcohol pads. If you're anybody else, you could use hand sanitizer. Okay, you're going to need to clean your needle or your pin off. And again, you can use the alcohol or hand sanitizer if you want. Soap and water if you have to. That's probably good enough. But alcohol or hand sanitizer would be better. Have on hand some clean gauze. Gauze is better than tissue because tissue, when it gets wet, comes apart. And gauze is meant to absorb fluid, and so it just has more structure. It's easier to use. It's sterile. So if you have some clean gauze, little 2-inch by 2-inch piece, perfect. You could use tissue. You could even use a clean, underline clean bandana, but you're going to need something that's kind of pushed down to force all the fluid out of the blister and then to kind of soak it all up so you can dry it off. You're going to puncture the blister from the side going parallel to the surface of the skin, and now's a good time to move. You don't want to poke down because then you hit the wound and that hurts. If you go in sideways, parallel to the skin, you're just going to prick the dead skin that's on the top of the blister. You can't even feel it. You'll feel a little tugging. There'll be no pain. The fluid inside is a little thicker than water, so sometimes it doesn't come out all that easily. You might have to prick it 2, 3, even 4 times. You don't want to tear the roof, but you want to make a couple of holes in it. Okay. Then, like in the top right, you can kind of use the gauze to mush the blister and force the fluid out. You can pad around with that same gauze, get all the fluid kind of cleaned up, and then you're going to put your dressing on, like down in the lower pictures. Now, people say, yeah, but there's more fluid coming out. You're right. That's what the body does. But that fluid's going to be absorbed by the hydrocolloid dressing. It's going to form a little cushion on there, and it's just as close as we can get to what the natural blister was, which is an environment that's set up to help your body heal. So you can't leave the bubble there because your sock is just going to rip it open anyway. So might as well puncture it in a clean environment and dry it off, clean it off, and get a dressing on it. Okay. Your blister kit, the items that you want to have somewhere, they don't have to be in a kit, but they got to be somewhere on you. Okay. Number one, for me at least, are those hydrocolloid dressings. A few of them. They're easy to buy on the Camino, but I'd start with a few so that you don't have to look for a drugstore right off the bat. You're going to have some Band-Aids anyway in case you cut your finger or something. So bring some Band-Aids, good Band-Aids, the fabric ones, not the little plastic ones. And because they are good short-term fixes, they could pad a red spot temporarily to get you to the albergue where you could put on some KT tape or a blister dressing over it. So Band-Aids have their place as well. It's probably worth carrying some KT tape if you like that idea of padding, especially if you have an area that's prone to blisters. Now, I have the side of my left heel. I seem to, that's always where I get a blister. And so I might next time, I'm not sure, but I might put a little piece of KT tape on there, and what can it hurt? You know, it might help. I'd carry some gauze. You can get little 2-inch by 2-inch squares in envelopes, a box of them in CVS or Walgreens for a couple of bucks. Take 4 or 5 little packets of them. Doesn't weigh anything, doesn't take up any space, and they're just a lot nicer to use on a wound. You might have to use them on a regular wound as well if it's too big for a Band-Aid, for example. Carry something that you can clean your wound and the needle or safety pin or something with. I carry a little sewing kit, so I got just a little sewing needle that I use also for my blister tool. I also carry a couple of little just regular size safety pins to pin my wet socks on the outside of my pack to dry, and they would work too as far as puncturing. But in any event, carry something that you can prick. You don't need some big old upholstery needle or halibut hook or something like that. You know, just something small, okay? And then optional, if you like the idea of the slipping and sliding method, Diane likes to use it. The anti-chafing sticks, that's what they're there for. That's what they're designed for, is to prevent friction. So, you know, by all means, go for it. Ben Camino, you know, have well-fitted and comfortable footwear. Be picky, take your time, get shoes that fit in the store, and then wear them around for a while to flush out any rough spots that might show up a little bit later. Wear clean socks. Now, clean socks aren't 100% blister related, but I got to tell you that at 2 o'clock on a hot afternoon, and you've been walking all day, there are very few things other than a cold beer that would make you feel better than a pair of clean socks. I mean, your spirits will lift exponentially. And so, you know, have a pair of clean socks handy that, you know, if it just gets to be a lousy day, your foot's getting sore, it's not blister, it's the bottom of your feet are sore. Take your shoes off, air out your feet, put on the clean socks. I guarantee the world's going to look like a nicer place. Pay attention to your feet. Stop if there's something wrong. Don't try to be noble about it. Stop. Don't try to stretch the last mile out of it. Stop. You know, and see what the problem is. You might be able to fix it. Don't overdo it. The road will always be there tomorrow. Just because you said you're going to hike 30 kilometers doesn't mean you have to hike 30 kilometers. You know, if you happen upon a village that you really like, there's room in the albergue, there's a nice bar right next door. I mean, go with the flow, you know, knock it off. And the trail has been there for thousands of years. It's going to be there for 1,000 more. So have fun on the Camino. And that's me. There's my email address. I welcome any kind of questions, comments, threats, jokes, criticisms, or whatever. And hope to see you out there someday.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
So we got time for questions. If anybody has questions, just like chime in. So Chuck, I see Chuck's hand up.
Not Chuck.
Yes, hi, good evening. This is Chuck from San Francisco. I'm leaving next Wednesday to have fun on the Camino. Mike, I delighted in your presentation. I've hiked the John Muir Trail here in the California Sierra Nevadas, climbing, I don't know, some insane 45,000 feet through through the mountains, and I've hiked across England and cycled all over the world. But I did find a couple of things that I wanted to perhaps add. You mentioned it at the end, changing your socks. I've in 1,000 or 2,000 miles of hiking, I've never had a blister. Cross my fingers. I'll talk to you in a month and tell you how bad my feet hurt. But one thing that I learned on the John Muir Trail is halfway through the day, I would take my shoes off, and the thing that causes friction is, for most people with trail runners with the porosity in the shoes, is dust and dirt and pebbles and things getting in. You always think it's a pebble, but oftentimes it's just dust and dirt causing problems. So halfway through the day, I take off my shoes, I rinse my feet, I change my socks, using liners like you, Mike, which are delightful. And that's just been fantastic for me, is just give them a quick little rinse from your bottle, put on a clean pair of socks, and like you said, life is good. And then shake the dust out of those shoes like crazy. Those things are just dust collectors. And anyways, I appreciate the presentation and look forward to my hike next week, the pilgrimage.
Well, best of luck to you. I know you'll have a great time, and you're absolutely right. There's even if you don't have any blisters and you've never had any blisters, it just feels really good to put on clean socks. So go for it. I'm there. Okay, what else we got?
Anybody else have any?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, so my question is, I've walked 2 Caminos, and getting the shoes just right is hard because my feet swell. So if you get them to fit in the store, they're much too tight by the end of the day. And then both times I had enormous trouble with blisters. I haven't been able to figure that out on my own, but we'll definitely try these. I'm embarrassed to say I'm a wound care and foot care nurse, but
are you really?
I heal myself.
Oh, gee whiz. My hat's off to you. That's a hard job. And
but the shoes.
Yeah, the two things, and there's some very experienced hikers in this gang that could chip in as well. But the two things that occur to me is that if you're having issues with foot swelling and sort of effectively changing sizes during your walk, you can compensate somewhat. They're extra cushion socks, they're full cushion socks, they're light cushion socks. You could carry different gauges of the socks. I've also found that what are those green insoles that you put in? What are they?
Super feet.
Super feet.
Yeah.
I found that those helped a lot as far as stabilizing my foot position. And they also come in different sizes, thin ones and regular ones. I think the purple ones are the skinny ones and green ones. I could be wrong. Could be a different color. But there are those two things. The other is the swelling of the feet, the stopping and cooling your feet off, like Chuck mentioned, is going to help that a lot. Just program in a half an hour a day where you're just going to sit and air dry those feet and let them cool down a little bit, and you may very well help. But I'm talking to an expert here. You know this stuff a lot better than me.
I might Oh, I was going to say, I might chime in too. Are you in Anchorage or?
Yes, Anchorage.
I might suggest that if you're going to go shop for shoes, is like go walk on the coastal trail for 9 miles, and then go shop for shoes. I mean,
oh yeah.
And really stress your feet. And I mean, because some people's feet swell a lot and some people's don't. And so obviously yours swell a lot. So I would just like go for a really long walk, and, make it flat so that you can walk a long ways, as opposed to, and then shop for shoes, and then know that in the mornings your feet won't swell as much. And so you might want to wear heavier, more padded socks in the morning, and then switch in the day when your feet start to swell to a thinner sock. But my feet actually gained a half a size after our first Camino. I mean, they
Yeah.
swelled a half a size bigger and they never went back. So
Yeah, I believe that.
I have now Camino feet.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Okay.
And
Well,
Jerry's got a question.
Well, Mike, thanks for mentioning Ingo patches. I'm a huge fan of them. I
oh,
carry
look
a
at
lot
that.
with
Look
me.
at that.
I carry a lot of them and give them away on the Camino, kind of try to give back a little bit. And boy, they saved me. The other comment I want to make is I walked 2 Caminos with a pharmacist from Switzerland. And she said, before you put on a Compeed patch, which I'm a big fan of, put it between your hands and warm it up. And it helps the adhesive a lot, she said, yeah. But thank you a lot. I learned a lot tonight. Thank you very much.
And that makes sense. That would activate the adhesive quite a bit more. As you know from the Enco patches, they recommend that you warm them up with a hairdryer as you put them in, because it helps with the adhesive and they stay in place longer. Although mine have stayed months and they haven't moved a bit. So that's cool about the Enco patches. Thanks for mentioning that. Okay.
Peggy. Hey, Peggy.
Hey there. So just a couple, that was a wonderful presentation, Mike. I really enjoyed it. And I have some little blue patches in my shoes as well.
No,
The Emco
no, all
patch.
you guys knew about it and I didn't know about it. There you go.
They work really well. But just like Diane, my feet swelled a full half size. And on the Camino Francis, I wasn't sure what setup to take. And I took different thicknesses of socks. And I thought, well, I'll put the socks I don't use in a Donativo box. And I think someone probably really enjoyed these kind of brand new socks because I gave away the thicker ones. And I thought, well, that's somebody else's treasure, you know? And and you see lots of people on the Camino Francis that walk the whole things in sandals because they get really bad blisters from the start and they can't wear their regular shoes. So the kind of Tiva heavier sandals are a nice second pair of shoe, but certainly, as Mike was saying, another pair of shoe is important to have in the evening so your feet can breathe and stuff. And the socks that are just magic for me are called Right socks, WRIGH.
Yeah.
And REI has them, and they actually have a liner within them. So that's what I've been using. All my socks in my drawer almost are exclusively Right socks. It's what I wear around town in Anchorage.
I use Right socks when I go on humanitarian aid missions in hot climates for that very reason. And they are synthetic, and so they dry relatively quickly. Their package says they guarantee no blisters. Now, how you would ever collect on that, I have no idea. But
Yeah,
but you know, that's a thought. Now, I prefer having the separate ones, but I do the same thing you do. When I'm headed out to Africa or something, the only thing in my backpack are Right socks.
Wow.
And just my final thought I was thinking about, I used to think having big calluses protected your feet. But in that book about feet that Jerry recommended, I can't think of the name, they honestly really don't. And if you have a big callus, there you go. And you get a blister under it, it's kind of double trouble. So I use, there are some preparations you can put on your feet if you're getting big calluses to help get rid of them, the liquid preparations. And I've done that if my feet get too calloused.
That's a good point.
Because it certainly doesn't help anything. But anyway, wonderful presentation. Thanks.
Oh, the book that Peggy was just referring to is called Fixing Your Feet. And it's got like more, if you want to totally nerd out on feet, I mean, it's got hundreds of pages about everything to do with feet, not just blisters. I mean, it's a cool book, but you have to be kind of a medical nerd to appreciate it. So anyway, okay.
So I'm just sort of an interloper here that I saw your meeting and joined in, but I was going to say on the last long walk I did, I had bought some shoes that were a little bit larger than my feet so they could grow and whatever. And my feet kept sliding in there. So I kept cinching them tighter and tighter, and it was getting uncomfortable. And finally, when I got back, I went to REI and said, oh, I need some different shoes because all of this.
Mhm.
And the guy said, oh, well, you're tying them wrong. And you guys maybe know this, but there's the 2 holes up by your ankle.
Oh.
And you know, you can loop it through there in such a way and loop them across so that you can pull it tight around your ankle and leave the rest of the foot loose. And so my
Yeah.
foot doesn't slide in there, but it still has room to expand. And that has helped me a lot. And then the other
Yeah.
thing, recently I bought some Chaco sandals, and I've so far been really happy with those because they, at least for me, they strap my foot in such a way that they don't move at all. It's like just having, like if I could glue a sole on the bottom of my foot, that's what it feels like, you know, that I can walk and it doesn't move at all, and yet I have the coolness of being open.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, you know, having shoes too big can be as big or bigger problem than too small. I mean, the worst blisters we ever saw on the Camino was some guy that had shoes that were too big and his foot slid around in them. And they're not trail shoes, but like running shoes. And both of the bottoms of both feet were one big blister. It's
Well,
like
now that I
his-
started tying mine differently,
his
I'm really
Camino
happy
was-
with having.
His Camino was over. Yeah.
Yeah, his Camino was done. It's like, and he was like, Mike, what can you know, because Mike was fixing everybody's feet. And he's like, yeah, bridge too far. Needed Pamela.
Yeah, there you go. I thought I saw a hand
Yeah,
over.
Paul, did you have a question?
Yeah, I got a
Comment?
question about rain and is there something that you can, some cover for shoes that keeps the rain off, like a gaiter? Because I'm thinking if I do a Camino later this year, it's likely to be rainy. And I have shoes that have a Gore-Tex barrier, I think, for the lower part, but I just wonder if anybody had thought or heard of something, you know, some cover for the top of the shoe to keep rain off.
I have a pair of really lightweight gaiters. They're called, I think, Dirty Girl gaiters. I don't know, Peggy, do you use those? They're like really, really lightweight, and they're just over your ankle to over the top of your shoe. I mean, and it keeps like they're designed to like keep scree out of the top. So they're not necessarily like waterproof or heavy gaiters, but it might be just enough to keep it off. And they weigh like ounces.
I just happened to be in REI yesterday and happened to walk by the display, and they are now carrying ankle high gaiters that kind of, they look like spats, you know, the old spats for shoes, you know, where they hook onto the front of your laces, and they would cover where you're going to get leakage, which would be around the laces. The Gore-Tex is going to keep the rest out, but it's around the laces where you get the seepage. So, I'm kind of a more just get your feet wet kind of guy, but if what you like to hike is to try to use the Gore-Tex and try to keep it dry, those might be the deal. I can't remember the brand, maybe somebody else remembers them, but you can get them in either ankle heights or the full-on calf lengths, but the front of them kind of has a hook that hooks into the very front of your laces, and it should keep your feet pretty dry.
Paul, if I might, I don't know about the waterproof portion of it, but I use Dirty Girl gaiters in the Sierras. I just got back from 6 days in the Sierras doing a lot of hiking in prep. And it's just used for, keeping dust and pebbles and scree out, which are friction, elements. And they look kind of funny, but you can get any kind of design and logo and crazy stuff. Just, do a little search on Amazon and you'll find them. And again, that's just for me, just a dust protector. I don't think it ever kept rain out. Another thing that I did is when we have water crossings, I don't know in September and early October what I'm going to run up against on the Camino, but if you're forced into water, we would go in, take our shoes off, pull the socks off, liner and sock, and actually pull the pad out of your shoe also. Then go through the water. If you can't get around on a trail, Then, you know, when you get through the forced water crossing or mud or whatever you're up against, you put the insole back in, put your socks back on, and you're off and running.
Thank
And
you.
then at night, stuff your shoes with newspapers
You
to
bet.
dry them
Yeah,
out.
dry them out as best you can. But if you know you're going into water, take your socks off. You know, but if it's raining, you know, you just got to walk it out.
Sometimes if you wear rain pants on the Camino, I wore kind of hiking shoes, and they weren't waterproof, but they had enough sort of fake leather around that they protected it. But I wore rain pants, and the top of the rain pants sort of covered my shoes, so it acted sort of like a gaiter without being kind of tight. I'm not sure I'm not going to take rain pants on this Ireland trip. I've moved over to rain skirts. So we'll see how wet my feet get over there.
So, okay.
Anybody
Well,
else have
Thank you
comments
very
or
much.
suggestions?
Thank you very much.
Other than that, well, thank you all for joining us, and best of luck on your grand adventures, and hope we see some or all of you back on October 5th for Peggy's class on sketching on the Camino.
Also, I wish you were doing that as a Zoom one.
We're actually going to try to do it both. We're going to do a little test run and
Okay,
see
so
if that.
I'm in Minneapolis, and I had heard about it through our local chapter, heard about this
Okay.
meeting. So hopefully you'll advertise, or however that one got.
Yeah,
out, you know,
yeah.
hopefully you'll mention it.
What I did is I sent it out to all of the chapter coordinators. But if you want to join, there's an Anchorage chapter has a Facebook group, and I usually put one on there. But Peggy and I are going to meet tomorrow and talk about whether her presentation could be live and on Zoom, and that way we can get more people, because it's always kind of fun to see what other chapters are doing. So
When
anyway,
I want to do that on my next Camino, and I've been trying to figure out, you know, what's the best, like, little tablet and drawing implements that I should bring along. So it'd be helpful to hear someone who's already done that.
yeah. Well, if you want to put your email address in the chat, I'll add you to our mailing list if you'd like, and then you'll get notices. And then you'll also get notices of our hike. So if you want to like pop up to Anchorage and go for a hike with us, we'd love to have you join us.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention when I'm gonna talk more about what to take. Like if you take a little kit, it's really helpful. I'm not actually gonna teach people how to sketch, but resources that are available. There's a lot on YouTube, and I pretty much learned to do it during COVID. So I was kind of at home for a lot of it. And now I feel proficient enough when I go on my next trip, which will be soon. It's not a Camino, but I'll come back with travel sketches. So I'll add some of those in. So anyway.
So I hadn't put it together that you were the person doing the next talk.
Yeah.
There's only 12 people in Anchorage, so you got them all here.
Mike, thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you very much for
Yeah, thanks
listening
very
to it
much.
all.
Great.
Okay, bye
See you
all.
later.
Thanks
Bye.
again.
Muchas gracias.
Okay. Nice travels, Jerry.
Gracias.